September 1969, Quảng Province. I was 23 years old, holding the hand of a soldier who was dying faster than I could stop the bleeding. And then I heard the crack. What happened in those 40 seconds changed everything. Not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a clean miracle. But it was enough for me to never again say that God wasn't there. My name is Thomas Earl Booker, and this is the story of how I got shot at 23, and why, even today at 79, I still can't explain what happened next. Let me give you the context first, because without context, the story doesn't make sense. January 1969. I arrived in Vietnam with the 1st Cavalry Division. I wasn't a doctor yet. I was a combat medic, Specialist 5. My job was simple. When someone went down, I went to them and did what I could to keep them alive until the helicopter arrived. Didn't carry an assault weapon. Carried morphine, bandages, plasma, trauma shears, and faith. But before I tell you about Vietnam, I need to tell you about Birmingham. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 50s and 60s. If you know American history, you know what that means. Birmingham was one of the most segregated cities in the South. My father was a deacon at Salem Baptist Church. My mother was an elementary school teacher. Faith wasn't optional in our house. It was the axis of everything. We prayed before every meal, prayed before bed, prayed before leaving the house. My father said prayer was our armor. And in Birmingham, in the 60s, you needed armor. I was 17 when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed. September 1963. 4 girls died. Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, Denise McNair. I didn't know them personally, but I knew people who did. Everyone knew someone. I remember my father that night. He sat in the living room, alone, with his Bible open on his lap. Wasn't reading, just staring at the page. My mother was in the bedroom crying, and I asked him, "Dad, where was God when that bomb went off?" He looked at me, took about 30 seconds to answer, and said, "He was there with those girls, and he's here with us now, and he'll be there when we have to do something with this pain." It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the answer he had, and somehow, it was enough to keep me believing. So when I got to Vietnam in January 1969, I took that faith with me, took the Bible my mother gave me, took the prayers my father taught me, and I believed, truly believed, that God would protect me. Because if he brought me there, he'd bring me back. At least, that's what I believed. January 1969, Cam Ranh Bay. I landed with 200 other soldiers. The heat hit my face like a wall. It wasn't just hot, it was humid, heavy, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin and doesn't come off. I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, combat medic, Specialist 5. They gave me 2 weeks of orientation and sent me to the field. My first week was in Quảng Trị, near the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, the border with North Vietnam, one of the hottest areas of the conflict. And I prayed, a lot. Prayed before every patrol, prayed while treating the wounded, prayed when we buried someone, and it worked. At least, I thought it worked. I spent the first 6 months without getting hit, saw people get hit, treated people who took bullets, grenade shrapnel, landmines. But me? Not a scratch. I started to believe I was protected, that God had his hand over me, that as long as I kept praying, I'd be safe. And then September came. My platoon had 34 men. I knew all of them by name, knew who had kids, who had a fiancé waiting back home, who wrote letters to their mom every week. One of them was Jesse Caldwell, 19 years old, from Dayton, Ohio. White, skinny, freckled, red hair that stood up even after a haircut.
always cracking jokes to lighten the tension. 3 months in country, Jesse was the type who made everyone laugh, even when things were bad, and in Vietnam things were always bad. Jesse found a way to make a joke. Nothing offensive, just light. And we needed that. He called me Doc. Everyone called me Doc. But when Jesse said it, it sounded different. Affectionate. Like we were brothers. And maybe we were. Because when you're in the jungle, thousands of miles from home, surrounded by people who want to kill you, the guys in your platoon become your family. Jesse used to ask me about Birmingham, about what it was like growing up in the South, about church. He'd never met a black person before joining the army. He told me that without shame, without malice, just a fact. And I liked him for that, for the honesty, for the genuine curiosity. We talked about faith sometimes. He wasn't religious, Catholic family, but he said he never really understood it. But he asked me questions. Doc, do you really believe God's here, in this place? And I always answered, I believe God is where we need him, and we need him here. Jesse would smile.
Shake his head. I don't know if he believed, but I think he wanted to. September 1969. We were on a search and destroy operation near the border with Laos. Quảng Trị, hot zone. I won't romanticize it. It was thick jungle, tall bamboo that cut your skin if you brushed it wrong, unbearable heat that made your uniform stick to your back, mosquitoes the size of my thumb, and the constant feeling, constant, that you were being watched. Because you were. The Viet Cong knew that jungle better than we knew our way home. They knew where we'd pass, knew where to set up ambushes, and we knew they knew. So you walked slow, looked at everything, listened to everything, and prayed. September 18th, 1969, 5 in the afternoon. We were heading back from patrol. Nothing happened all day, no contact, no shots. We were starting to relax. That's the mistake you can never make. But we made it. And then we heard the first shots. The first thing you learn in an ambush is that chaos isn't loud, like in the movies. It's confusing. Someone's yelling to get down, another's yelling coordinates, the radio's crackling, and you're trying to figure out where the fire's coming from. I hit the ground, found cover behind a fallen log, heart pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. And then I hear, "Medic! Medic!" My stomach dropped. Because when you're a medic, that scream means one thing. Someone's dying, and you have to go to them. I lifted my head, tried to see who was screaming. Couldn't. But then someone yelled the name, "Jesse! It's Jesse!" Didn't think, just ran. Ran low, zigzagging between trees, shots still coming from somewhere to the left. Heard a bullet pass near my head. That high-pitched sound, like an amplified bee buzz. I reached him. Jesse was on the ground, on his back, eyes open, and blood. So much blood. I saw the hole before I saw his face. In the chest, left side. The shirt was soaked. I knelt beside him, dropped my pack, opened the medical kit. Jesse looked at me, tried to speak. No sound came out, just a blood bubble in his mouth. That's a sign of a punctured lung. I knew it. He knew it. Everyone who'd ever seen it knew it. I opened his shirt. The hole was small. AK-47 entry wound, 7.62 caliber. But I knew from the way he was breathing, from the wheezing sound in his chest, that the lung had collapsed. Maybe worse. Maybe hit the heart. I grabbed the occlusive bandage. It's a special bandage with an adhesive side that you stick over chest wounds to prevent air from continuing to enter. I sealed the wound, applied pressure. I yelled into the radio,
Dust off! Dust off! We need medevac now!" The crackling voice on the radio responded. "Copy that. Dust off inbound. ETA 8 minutes." 8 minutes. I looked at Jesse. He was fading. Eyes starting to roll back, lips turning blue, skin going pale. I held his hand, and I spoke close to his ear. "Jesse, you're not dying here. Not today. You're going back to Ohio. You're gonna see your mom again. You're gonna marry that girl you always talk about. You're gonna have kids. You're getting out of here." I don't know if he heard me. The shots continued. Someone yelled they'd seen movement to the right. More fire. I kept pressing Jesse's chest, checking his pulse. Weak. Too weak. And that's when I prayed. I didn't pray asking God to save Jesse, because in that moment, I didn't know if God could do that. I'd already seen too many people die. Good people. People who deserved to live. I prayed asking God to give me more time. 5 more minutes. Just 5 minutes until the helicopter arrived. I wasn't asking for a miracle. I was asking for time. And that's when I heard the crack. It wasn't an explosion. It was a crack. Sharp. Metallic. Like when you break a tree branch, or when you hit metal on metal. And I felt the impact. In my chest, left side, exactly where my hand was on Jesse. For a second, literally a second, I didn't understand what had happened. And then I did. I'd been shot. I looked down, saw the hole in my ballistic vest. Left side, about 2 inches above the heart. Have you ever been hit by something and didn't feel pain immediately? It's like that. Your brain takes a few seconds to register. You see, you know, but you don't feel. I took my hand off Jesse, ran my hand over my chest, over the vest, expected to feel warm blood, expected to feel the hole. Nothing. I opened the vest with trembling hands, pulled my shirt up. No hole, no blood, nothing. I looked at the vest again. The hole was there, small, clean, clear perforation. I took the vest off, turned it over, and I saw it. The bullet, embedded in the second layer of nylon, deformed, flattened, but stopped. Ballistic vests in 1969 weren't what they are today. It wasn't modern Kevlar. It wasn't ceramic plates. It was ballistic nylon. Layers of tight fabric with, if you were lucky, a thin steel plate in the center. Mine was standard, Army issued, old, beat up.
I'd been wearing it for 8 months, had sweat, dirt, tears at the edges. And that bullet? Fired from about 50 meters, AK-47, 7.62 caliber, muzzle velocity of 2,330 feet per second, entered and stopped. Didn't ricochet, didn't deflect, entered, perforated the first layer, and stopped at the second. I grabbed the bullet with my fingers. It was still warm. I put it in my pocket, and I went back to Jesse. Because in that moment, I didn't have time to process what had just happened to me. I had a job, and Jesse was still dying. I kept pressing his chest, monitoring his pulse, talking to him. "Hang in there, Jesse. 3 more minutes, just 3 more minutes. And then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. The beating of Huey helicopter blades. The dust-off arrived. 2 paramedics jumped out, put Jesse on the stretcher. I briefed them fast. Gunshot wound to the chest, collapsed lung, severe blood loss, occlusive bandage applied, weak pulse. They nodded, put Jesse on the helicopter, and he was gone. I stayed there, kneeling on the ground, covered in blood. Jesse's, not mine, with a bullet in my pocket and a hole in my vest. And I felt nothing. Not relief, not fear, not gratitude, just empty. One of the guys from the platoon came to me, Williams. He looked at my vest, saw the hole. "Doc, you okay?" I just nodded. "You got shot?" "Yeah." "You bleeding?" "No." He looked at the vest, looked at me, shook his head. "Man, you're lucky." Lucky. Was I? That night, back at base camp, I sat alone, took the bullet out of my pocket, looked at it, tried to understand. Physically, I could explain it. The bullet was at the end of its trajectory, had traveled about 50 meters, lost velocity. The angle wasn't direct, probably hit something first, deflected slightly, arrived with less energy. The vest, as old as it was, still had 2 intact layers of ballistic nylon. And ballistic nylon, when compressed, can stop low-velocity projectiles. All of that makes sense. Physics, ballistics, science. But why did the bullet come exactly when I was praying for 5 minutes? Why did it hit the vest and not my neck, which was exposed, or my head, or my arm? Why did I have time to stabilize Jesse before getting hit? And why did the bullet stop? I spent the entire night awake, looking at the bullet, trying to decide what it meant. Was it God? Was it luck? Was it just physics? 3 weeks later, I got the news. Jesse had survived, spent 6 months in recovery, went back to Dayton, Ohio, married his girlfriend, had 2 kids. We never spoke again. I don't know why. Maybe because we didn't know what to say. Maybe because that day was too heavy to revisit. Maybe because we just wanted to leave Vietnam behind. But I think about him, to this day. Wonder if he remembers that day. Wonder if he knows I got shot trying to save him. Wonder if he believes in God now. I came back from Vietnam in December 1971. 2 years and 11 months in country. Came back with a Bronze Star for action under fire. Came back with metal fragments in my left shoulder that doctors decided not to remove because it was too close to a nerve. And I came back with a bullet in my pocket. For a long time, I didn't know what to do with it. Because look, I eventually became a doctor. Used the GI Bill, went to Meharry Medical College, graduated in 1975. Did my residency in emergency medicine. Spent my entire life studying the human body, ballistics, trauma, physics. And physically, I can explain what happened that day. The bullet was at the end of its trajectory, lost velocity. The angle wasn't direct. The vest, as old as it was, still had 2 intact layers. The probability of a low-velocity bullet being stopped by ballistic nylon isn't 0. It's low, but it's not 0. So yes, physically, it's explainable. But that doesn't explain why the bullet came exactly when I was praying for 5 minutes. Doesn't explain why it hit the vest and not my neck. Doesn't explain why I had time to stabilize Jesse before getting hit. Doesn't explain why I felt, and I felt, that I wasn't alone in that jungle. And I've spent 55 years trying to decide, was it God? Was it luck?
Was it just physics? And this is where I should give you a pretty answer. Tell you that God saved me because he had a bigger plan for me. That I came back from Vietnam and dedicated my life to serving, and everything made sense. And part of that is true. I came back, became a doctor, worked 40 years, went to Africa as a volunteer doctor, Kenya, Mozambique, Rwanda, Angola, helped people, saved lives, trained young doctors, got married, had kids. My daughter's a doctor. My son's a pastor. So yes, my life had purpose. But I lost my brother Calvin in Vietnam, 3 months before I got shot. March 1970. Operation Texas Star, Quảng Trị Province. Calvin was 21 years old, 2 years younger than me. Infantry, 23rd Infantry Division. He didn't come back.
And when I found out, when I got the letter from my mother 3 weeks after his death, because letters took time to arrive, I prayed. I prayed, asking God to explain. I prayed, asking God to tell me why Calvin didn't have the same luck I did. Why his bullet didn't stop. Why God didn't protect him the same way he protected me. And you know what answer I got? None. Silence. That almost destroyed my faith. Almost. Because how could I believe in a God who saved me but didn't save my brother? How could I believe that bullet stopping was a miracle when Calvin, who was younger, more innocent, purer than me, died? It didn't make sense. And for a long time I carried anger. Anger at God. Anger at myself for surviving. But after years, decades, I came to a conclusion. And it's not a pretty conclusion. It's not an answer that will satisfy everyone. But it's the truth I live with. I don't know why I was saved and Calvin wasn't. I don't know why that bullet stopped. I don't know if it was God, or luck, or physics, or some combination of the three. What I know is this. I was there, in that jungle, in September 1969, praying for 5 minutes. The bullet came, the bullet stopped. Jesse lived. I lived. And somehow, in a way I can't fully rationalize, in a way that doesn't fit perfectly into any theological or scientific explanation, I felt that I wasn't alone. I felt something. Presence. Peace. Protection. I don't know what to call it, but I felt it. And that was enough to change my faith. Not because I now have all the answers. I don't. Not because I now understand why some people are saved and others aren't. I don't. But because I now know that the questions are real. The doubt is real. The pain is real. And God is still there. Even when I don't understand. Even when I'm angry. Even when I can't explain. He's there. Or at least, I choose to believe he is. And maybe that's what faith means. Not having absolute certainty, but choosing to believe even without certainty. Choosing to believe that bullet stopped for a reason, even if I never know what it was. Choosing to believe I came home for a reason, even though Calvin didn't. Choosing to believe God was there, even when he didn't answer. I have other stories. From Vietnam, from other patrols, from other lives I held in my hands, from Africa, from Kenya, from Mozambique, from Rwanda in 1994, and that story will leave you speechless. Some stories have better answers, some have worse answers, but they're all real. And if you want to hear them, if you're also trying to understand what faith is when life doesn't make sense, when answers don't come, when God seems silent, I'll keep telling them. Because after 79 years, one thing I've learned, you don't need all the answers to believe in something. Sometimes,
a bullet that stopped is enough. Sometimes 5 more minutes is enough. Sometimes surviving when you shouldn't have is enough. And sometimes just feeling that you're not alone, even without proof, even without explanation, is enough. That doesn't solve everything, doesn't bring Calvin back, doesn't explain why the world is the way it is, but it kept me alive, kept me believing, kept me moving forward. And maybe that's what faith is for. Not to give you answers, but to give you strength to live with the questions. Subscribe for more stories. Doc Booker.